Welcome back to Mind and Magic. I am Frater Xavier, and this is a video I really did not expect to make nor want to make, but rather one I felt I should make because this isn't just going to be another video about Charlie Kirk. It's also going to be covering some of the astrology of what happened. And I understand that Mr. Kirk was a huge Christian and as such was probably against things like astrology. But also, as I understand it, he was a big proponent of free speech and the marketplace of ideas so that people can decide for themselves. So what I present here today is not with the intent of disrespecting what he stood for, what he did. It's the exact opposite. I have a lot of respect for what he did. I may not have been a fan, as college debates aren't particularly my preferred content, or agreed with a lot of his positions, particularly with religion, because I am a hermeticist after all. But he still had my respect and, more importantly, the right to say those things. Violence is never the answer. Violence only begets more violence. In Hermeticism, violence is equated to the element of fire, and fire is an element that likes to spread if left unchecked. Like many others, I've seen the video online of what happened, and I was completely mortified. It's something that has stuck with me. It is not an easy thing to clear from the mind. He did not deserve what happened to him. Nobody does. And for those who say he did and are celebrating what happened to him, understand that you are giving an open invitation to ruin when Saturn, the Lord of Karma, swings back into a return, square, or opposition to its natal position in your chart. You do not want to speak ill of the dead. This is something that I brought up in a video not that long ago. Ancient civilizations revered their deceased by placing them in grandiose tombs and temples. Burial grounds are considered sacred for a reason. So even if you disagree with everything that this man stood for, or anyone else for that matter, no matter which side they're on of your political leanings, your religious faith, or any other charged disagreements that you have, to revel in their death, or in this case, assassination, is not only low class and in bad taste, but it's also setting you up for future catastrophe. And so if your life sucks in the future because some calamity has fallen upon you, I want you to remember what you have done. And not for the sake of punishment, not for the sake of vengeance, but so that you remember not to make the same mistake again. We as a species tend to make the same mistakes over and over and over. As they say, those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. They also say those who keep doing the same thing expecting a different result are insane. Humanity has a bad case of insanity. We have tread this ground before. Perhaps not in our lifetimes, but that's why it's so important to study history. My heart goes out to and absolutely breaks for Mr. Kirk's wife and children. I've seen clips of his beautiful kids running to their father, calling Daddy, so happy and excited to be with them. That's who the assassin really hurt. That's who he really traumatized. There are sick individuals out there who are even wishing harm upon this man's lovely family. Do you not understand that what you put out there is returned to you? That karma is cyclical in nature? That's the basis of the phrase, what comes around goes around. That everything returns to source, including ill will. And as the source of that, it will be returned upon you at some point in your life. My people perish for lack of knowledge. Hosea 4:6. And Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Luke 23:34. So even if you truly believe that someone deserved what they got, why would you open yourself up to the same thing by celebrating it? Do not rejoice when your enemy falls, and do not let your heart be glad when he stumbles. Proverbs 24:17. So it's best to keep those things to yourself if you believe that. Otherwise, you may be seeding a bad time for you down the road. And this is probably one of the areas where Mr. Kirk and I would disagree, because Christians tend to view God as all good, even though Isaiah 45:7 says that God also creates evil and darkness. And that Deuteronomy 32:35 and Romans 12:19 both say that vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. So God can and does terrible things, according to Scripture. It's not all love and light. And so I urge you not to invite his wrath upon you. I'd like to give my deepest condolences to the Kirk family for what little that is worth, because nothing can really ease the immense sorrow and suffering that they are going through. Mr. Kirk's company is Turning Point USA, and it's my hope that this is a turning point for this country to wake up to its own insanity and take a hard look at what we've been doing to each other. There are certain forces that are trying to bait us as a nation into civil war. You hear them talking about it. They've even made a movie about it not long prior. The only way that they can get their ideal communist utopia is to first destroy the country as we know it. And so we must resist it. America can only fall from the inside when divided. But only we have the power to allow or disallow that. I'm going to take a quick break, and then we're going to get into the astrology of what happened, as well as what I believe to be the solution to the widespread violence in our country. All right, welcome back. I want to get into how, as a society, we can diminish the violence in this country, because we do have a huge problem with violence in the United States, despite having laws against it, despite having punishments up to and including the death penalty in many states. It's not working because those committing these acts do not care about themselves or their lives enough to be a proper deterrent. And so I would like to suggest some solutions, because what we've been doing hasn't been working. And I don't like to bring up problems that I can't offer a practical solution for. I have spoke about this in the past, but I believe I made that video a Patreon exclusive only, because at the time it was made, it was considered quite a controversial opinion, and I was the only one saying it. Fast forward to the present day, and things have not gotten better. They've only gotten worse. And because of that, I'd like to reintroduce these ideas publicly. We need justice reform, but not in the way that has been done recently with no bail and that kind of thing, because that's only made the violent crime go up. What we really need as a society is a proper deterrent and a practical guarantee that the violent will be turned docile. As such, I recommend castration for all repeat violent offenders. And by that, I mean serious repeat offenses, not just because you got in a fist fight with somebody at the bar or had a scuffle with somebody, unless it becomes a pattern. The castration in question does not need to be surgical. It can be chemically induced, allowing the offenders to keep their testicles so long as testosterone is no longer being produced. If implemented, this will significantly reduce the violent crime in the country. Because one, it will make the repeat violent offender docile. Because without the testosterone, they will lose their predisposition towards violence, in most cases. Two, it will help break the cycle of violence from being passed down to children that they no longer can have. Nobody wants children to be around such violent people anyway. And three, it would deter violence probably more than the death penalty, because there is no street cred in being a eunuch. If you listen to the music that glorifies violence, you'll understand that they're not afraid of death. The death penalty is not much of a deterrent from those who are not afraid to die. What they are afraid of is looking weak. They have to be hard. They got to have street cred. And it would be difficult to look strong in front of your buddies with no testosterone
and a voice that sounds like you've been huffing helium.
And this is why I do believe this to be the societal solution to repeat violent offenders. This would not be meant as a replacement for prison or the death penalty, but rather in addition to. This will also tie in with those criminals who are arrested 14 times and still let out to murder someone, like the man who killed that poor woman on that train for no good reason at all. Because had he been snipped, he would no longer have the temperament or disposition to do such a thing, despite having 14 prior offenses and being let out. I think that after 3 or 4 serious violent offenses, they should be snipped. Now, I know that there are going to be people who disagree with this, and they're going to bring up the 8th Amendment, saying that it is cruel and unusual punishment. However, it is neither cruel nor unusual, because if it is good enough for Fido, it should be good enough for us. One cannot advocate fixing your animals, calling it the humane thing to do on one hand, and then turn around and call it cruel if we do it to ourselves on the other. Because then every pet owner who's had his pet quote-unquote fixed would be then guilty of animal cruelty, when all these years it's been called humane. And in the case of animals, it's usually done surgically when you really don't have to do that. It can be done chemically, so that it's practically non-invasive. And it's quite a common thing, not because you're punishing your pets, but because it works. It does get them to settle down and eases destructive behaviors. The other thing that I think we need to look at is judges who allow repeat violent offenders to go out and murder again to share in the consequences of that. Because if they did, then they wouldn't do it. I think that after so many of these occurrences, they should be removed from the bench, not as punishment, but rather for exercising bad judgment as a judge. This is the kind of judicial reform that we need, because the public is getting very tired of hearing that some violent offender was let out of prison after many such similar offenses. We always wonder, why weren't they in prison? This shouldn't have happened. And so judges need to share in some of the responsibility of their judgments, because that would deter the release of those violent offenders who they know have a predisposition towards violence. And the castration penalty would also serve to tone that down as well, so that if they did release somebody, it would be less likely to happen. Now, neither of those proposals would have necessarily helped in this particular case with Mr. Kirk, because the shooter had no prior offenses, and so this was his first one. However, the nature of his crime should warrant more than just the death penalty, but rather a public execution, because that's essentially what he did to Mr. Kirk. It was a public assassination, and therefore what should be returned to him is a public execution. But I don't think the solution should all be about judicial reform and law and order, but it needs to also be about compassion and getting those with mental issues the help that they need, and bring back asylums, although we want to have those heavily regulated so that the evil abuses of the past cannot be revisited, because there is a reason that certain people become violent. And we need to get to the root cause instead of just the symptoms. I believe that a lot of diet and environmental factors play into this. Did you know that there's a single microbe that lives in the small intestine that can make you more loving, kind, compassionate, and empathetic towards other people? Just one single type of microbe that if you've ever had antibiotics, you no longer have this microbe. If you were bottle fed instead of breastfed, you don't have this microbe. And we're going to be talking about that in an upcoming video. So make sure that you subscribe to the channel. You won't want to miss it. But perhaps this microbe, this probiotic, should be fed to prisoners in prison to make them more compassionate towards others. That can also be part of the solution. It's worth consideration. And we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to get into the astrology of what happened on September 10th. A reminder that the end of the year sale is going on over at mindandmagick.com. Save 40% on all programs, courses, and bundles for yourself or as a gift for others. This is your opportunity to take advantage of the lowest prices of the year and the lowest prices until the end of the year next year. So head on over to mindandmagick.com, link in the video and in the description. Welcome back. One of the things that I know a lot of people are wrestling with in the light of this terrible tragedy and times that we live in is how can God allow something like this to happen? Especially to someone like Charlie Kirk, who is the embodiment of the quintessential young Christian man. Pro-Jesus, pro-Second Amendment, pro-freedom of speech, pro-America. Why wouldn't God or Jesus save one of his most important and influential supporters? I thought that Jesus saves. Well, Jesus does save, or rather, Jesus saves. In astrology, Jupiter is the protector. Jesus is a combination of the sun and Jupiter. Jesus, Zeus being the Greek god counterpart of the Roman god Jupiter. We all know the Jesus fish. That is a representation of Pisces, which is the astrological sign that is co-ruled by Jupiter. But this planet in your natal chart will take the hits for you, will protect you. What will it protect you from? Well, that depends on where Jupiter is placed in your chart. For example, my own natal Jupiter is in the sign of Scorpio, the sign of death and taxes. So I have some limited protection against death and taxes, as well as any other Scorpio correspondences. So like a cat, I may get some extra lives, although I may not get 9 of them, and I've used up a few already. There have been a couple occasions that I should not have been able to walk away from. One of which gave me a severe spinal injury, but the other one I walked away unscathed, and still do not understand how I did so without divine intervention. If we look at Mr. Kirk's natal chart, we find that he has very important placements in the sign of Libra. We have Jupiter, the Sun, and the Moon. And Libra corresponds with balance, fairness, justice, and its symbol is the scales, weighing both sides of an issue. It's no wonder that he was doing what he was doing with such heavy placements in Libra. Now, we don't know where the axis points are in his chart, his ascendant, his midheaven, etc., because we do not have an exact birth time. Because we only know where he was born, we only know which signs the planets were at the time of his birth, but his rising sign and his houses are unknown. Now, when it comes to accidents, violence, murders, vengeance, it's almost always at the behest of one planet, and that planet is Mars, which we see is transiting Libra at the time of the event, conjunct his Jupiter and his Sun. So Jupiter, in this case, should have protected him. So why didn't it? Well, if we look to the sign of Scorpio, which I said is the sign of death, we can see a transit being made by what is known as Lilith. Lilith is a calculated point in the chart that represents the shadow self, repressed rage. It can indicate violence, and it is conjunct his natal Pluto. Now, Pluto is Hades. It is the lord of the underworld, and anytime Pluto is conjunct or has strong aspects to planets in your charts for an event, I recommend rescheduling. Because as Lord of the Underworld, Pluto's job is to bring you to the underworld, so to speak. Instances involving Pluto are almost always fatal or terminal. Pluto does not give second chances. So with Lilith representing pent-up rage and violence, conjunct Pluto, this may have been enough to get through the shield of Jupiter. Also, Pluto has a sextile connection to the planet Venus in Virgo, and Venus happens to rule the sign of Libra, where Mars is attacking. We also notice that none of the other transiting planets are around to assist. Most of his natal placements are on one side of the chart, and the transiting planets are mostly on the other side with the exceptions of Mars and Lilith. Mr. Kirk's natal Pluto also has a semi-sextile aspect to his natal Jupiter, meaning the energies are mixed, making it way more likely for the attack to be lethal. A semi-sextile aspect is typically a minor one. However, in this case, it is not. It would have made a difference because it involves Pluto. My better half has even rescheduled the surgery because the day that they had scheduled for her had a Pluto conjunction with Mercury, which represents healthcare. Once that was discovered, it was promptly rescheduled. Again, the people perish for lack of knowledge. Astrology is all about timing. Canceling and rescheduling an event can make all the difference in how things turn out when these planetary energies have shifted into other positions. The timing of this event was unfortunate. If Mars and Lilith were not transiting in the positions they were in, this probably would not have happened, or at least Jupiter would have protected him. If we look at Donald Trump's natal chart for July 13th, 2024, when he was in Butler, Pennsylvania, where an assassin's bullet narrowly missed him, we could see that transiting Mars is up near the midheaven axis point of the chart, making it very public and making sure that everyone sees the attempt. But that Mars is also squared his natal Mars. And with Mars being in conflict with itself, while his natal Jupiter is in a trine and harmonious aspect to the transiting Jupiter, this could be enough to cause the shooter to narrowly miss, along with the fact that transiting Pluto is nowhere near any of the other planets, and the natal Pluto is just out of reach, transiting Jupiter and Mars. Just barely. Just like the attempt. I hope this sheds some light on how some can narrowly avert disaster, while others simply cannot, and a lot of it has to do with timing, more specifically the astrological timing of such events. And there's also one other thing that can make a huge difference, and that is protection magic. Here at Mind and Magic, we always recommend doing some sort of protection magic. I understand that many of the Christian faith believe magic to be evil and of the devil, but even the devil is of God, for that's who created him. We view magic as Charlie Kirk viewed guns, that it is not inherently evil, but a tool in which the person wielding it is the responsible party. Case in point, a story came out that witches on the site Etsy were casting spells and doing magic against Charlie Kirk, which a lot of people scoff at, but these are people who have no experience with such things and therefore do not know what it is capable of. And then there are those who use magic to protect others. The same witches that were attacking him were also attacking Trump, as along with many others, and they started complaining that their magic wasn't having the effect that they wanted it to, that he was somehow protected. Well, you're welcome. I was one of the magicians protecting him, along with myself. But I did so not out of any political affinity, but because I honestly thought he was the best chance to get to the bottom of the Epstein case and bring those responsible to justice. This was something that was important to me because there is nothing that I consider more wicked than harming a child. Unfortunately, the president seemed to have a change of heart after his assassination attempt. I do not think that he was in on it. I do think that he knows there are those out there who will stop at nothing to keep this from coming to light. However, because he has been reluctant to expose the monsters behind the Epstein case, he is no longer under the magical protection that I was providing while he was running for office. Not because I want to see anything happen to him, I do not. But I cannot in good conscience cover for somebody who is covering for those responsible for such crimes. I really thought that he would blow the thing wide open, and I'm extremely disappointed in how things have been handled. What happened to Charlie Kirk is extremely tragic and terrible, but do not let it distract you from the other unresolved issues that they want you to forget. I always find it to be such a coincidence that when the public is ready to break out their torches and pitchforks, that something always happens to take their focus away from what they were angry about. I'm not saying that's what happened in this case, but I do find it oddly coincidental. Right now, the world grieves for Charlie Kirk in what I hope to be the turning point for this country. But I also hope that when we're finished mourning, we get back to demanding answers for what we know to be one of the largest cover-ups in history. There's still no list, and they're going to have to produce something, or it will not go away until the public is satisfied. People are fed up with all the evil around them, and we got to start holding people accountable for their actions. Thank you for listening, and take care.
I don't know.